Hi, my name is Gerhard Schwartner, and welcome to our webinar. Today we have a special guest, Tom Stanfill. He is the co-founder and CEO of Aslan Training. Welcome, Tom.
Welcome, Gerhard. Good to see you again, my friend. This has been, what, maybe 6, 7, 8 event together?
Absolutely. And I'm still impressed by your new book that you wrote, Unreceptive.
I got it.
Hold it up. Yeah.
And you say, yeah, beautiful. Thank you.
And this is really a magical image here, a closed door, because Tom is going to share with us how to make the customer more receptive and specific strategies that he has learned over the last few decades that really work. And I think the book is very worth reading and investing in when you train your sales force. Take it away, Tom.
Thank you, Gerhard. And thank you for all of the attendees. Thank you for joining us. I know it's easy to sign up for a webinar, but as I did yesterday, but to actually show up, I know your time is very valuable. So my goal is to make it extremely helpful and tactical and not tease you with information so that you'll reach out, but actually provide very tactical solutions. And the focus, as Gerhard said, the goal of this webinar is to help you develop some strategies to address what I think is the biggest barrier in selling right now. It's not how to demonstrate value. And I don't really even think it's a pipeline problem or a grow account share problem. I think it's buyer resistance. I think the buyer resistance has skyrocketed, and what we've been doing doesn't work. And if reps, we need sellers to execute, right? But the current strategies, the traditional approach doesn't work, as we're going to unpack in this session. And the good news, and it's not a way to think about it, the good news is the customers, decision makers aren't rejecting a solution. That's good news. They need what we offer. What they're rejecting is a sales call. And so what we need is to develop a new mindset, a new skill set to break through the barrier. But it's a different barrier. It's not a logical barrier. It's an emotional barrier. So we're going to talk about that. As we go throughout the webinar, Gerhard's going to be looking for questions. So I'd love for us to field questions as we go through, and then I'll certainly try to save some time at the end for some Q&A as well. So let's dive into some specific strategies. But before we do that, I want to illustrate kind of what's happening in the market, and I think this will help you see where we're going. As we look at kind of going back to the 1950s, and that's kind of where I started there, because I think the amount of information and noise in the market that we were consuming was pretty palatable. But if you look at what's happened with information and noise, it's skyrocketed, especially in the last 10 years. I just read some research. The amount of information we're copying or consuming or being created since 2010 has increased 48x. And it's going to double again by 2025. I mean, we are overwhelmed with information, which there's two problems with that if you're in sales. One is the availability of information makes a seller less valuable. I don't need you, right? Which actually, McKinsey did a study and asked B2B buyers, you know, how do you feel about working with the seller when you're evaluating a solution? That number of people that wanted to talk to a seller when evaluating solutions declined 120% in the last 3 years. It's probably gone up. I think that study was conducted towards the end of 2019, 2020. So the information is hurting us. It's also harder to get people's attention, right? So what's happened? Receptivity to sellers has plummeted, right? So their desire to work with us, their desire to talk to us. I mean, everybody knows how many messages we're getting and how many different channels people are doing, because what's happened is the noise has gone up. The amount of information that they're sending has increased. So we focused on more, not better, which is, I want to change that. I want us to look at better, not more. So what have we done in the sales world to combat this challenge? Well, we've continued to develop new and better ways to sell, which has been good. Features, advantages, benefits came out in the 60s. Then we had spend selling in the 80s. And then we talked about solution selling. And Gerhard's very familiar with these terms because he's had all of them as part of his organization. Then we have the latest, the greatest challenger selling, and everybody bought the book into the challenger selling, and now we're all about AI, right? We got all the AI tools, and these are all good things, but here's the problem. None of them convert the unreceptive customer, right? The traditional approach to selling doesn't convert. AI tools don't help, but they may help give us a little bit better information. They may give us better insights, but they don't teach us how to convert the unreceptive. And here's why. When someone is emotionally closed, which is what we're facing right now, that's what I mean by unreceptive. They're emotionally closed. The more we try to persuade them, the more closed they become, right? So what do? If you sell, you lose. If you don't sell, you lose. So what we do is we just crank up the volume. And here's what I mean by traditional approach. We think of selling typically as really like going to court. You know, we're going to take you to court. We're going to make our best argument. We're going to have our best use case. We're going to come up with our most compelling arguments. And then what's going to happen is the customers go, I'm not in the courtroom, right? They're unreceptive. And so we have to change our approach. And we need to think about it kind of like a farmer thinks about growing the crop. When you ask a farmer, what's the first thing you do if you want a vibrant, fruitful crop? And they're going to say they got to prepare the soil. They know that no matter what the value of the seed or the quality of the seed they have, it doesn't matter unless the soil is fertile. And so we've got to create a fertile soil. This is very similar to what we need to do in selling. There's two dimensions. There's the customer's receptivity, the soil, and then there's our message. If the soil's not receptive, the message doesn't matter. And we are working really hard to find new fields, new fertile soil, and we are running out of it. And that's why we're constantly looking for new and better. But what we need to do is change our approach. And this is what I want to talk about today. If we shift from how do I just communicate a better value prop and how do I deliver it hundreds of times every day to how do I create a fertile soil, we're going to be successful. And there's sellers out there that are doing that, and they have a distinct competitive advantage over the competition. And by the way, this is also what's driving turnover. Sellers, they're struggling to deal with this receptivity. So they're looking for the magic bullet, and they're looking to work for a company that's got the solution that everybody wants, because they want to be in demand fulfillment versus demand gen, because demand gen's not working, but it does work, right? But if we change the way we think about prospecting, and if we change the way we think about influence, and we change the way we think about process, we can be successful. So that's what I want to share with you. So let's start with kind of our role. I like to redefine what a seller's role is, because I think a lot of people don't really understand that. Our role is to influence, right? And what does influence look like? Influence is not teaching somebody about what they need to know about a solution, right? That's more just education. You know, that somebody sitting across the table saying, tell me what to do. Right, we're not winning there now, because there's just so few people who are willing to sit in a room and go, tell me what to do, right? What's happening now is there's two polarized points of view. If you look at the customer, this is their point of view down here on the South Pole, and they may have biases against your solution. They may have a current relationship that they're satisfied with. They're in love with the status quo. They may think your solution's too expensive. They have a different point of view than your point of view, right? There's polarized points of view. Your point of view is, I want to get them to change. Our solution makes sense. They've got the wrong biases about our solution. Well, the question is how do we get them to see our point of view? What do you do? There's really 4 strategies that most sellers adopt. The first one is control. I'm going to control. I'm going to try to force you to listen to my message, whether I'm going to barrage you with it or I'm going to just keep talking and you're just going to sit there. The problem is that doesn't work. Control is an illusion. You can't control people. Control does not lead to influence. It may make you feel better, but doesn't lead to influence. Another philosophy is consider. Here, listen, I know you're not listening to me right now. I see this a lot in farmer reps. I know you're not listening, but consider this, and it's just kind of walking by and I'm telling you stuff. Consider this message. Think about it. Let me know if you ever need it. Doesn't work. They're not going to consider why they should pay 2x more for your solution as you're walking by or you're sending out messages. Then there's the compromise. Well, what if we meet halfway? That's a very popular one. We'll meet halfway. The problem is you reached out to them. They're not interested in meeting halfway. And plus, if you did, they would share their point of view. You'd share yours, and then they would go, thank you. It doesn't work. Here's my favorite, and this is my go-to. It's always been my go-to, is convince. This is where I'm going to make a very powerful argument, and I'm going to try to convince you that my position is correct and why you need to change. And that does not work. Think about what we do when we try to convince. If we got a polarized point of view, when I start to convince you, really the message is you're wrong. And when I tell you you're wrong, your reaction to that isn't, oh, well, thank you, and I'm going to change now, right? You're wrong, follow me. No, that's not the best way to influence. What we need to do is get them to see our point of view, but there's a couple of things we have to do before that. And this is where I learned that. I learned this approach the hard way, and I'm going to share a personal story with my wife. She's actually in the other room. But I learned this with her and with my wife when she had some health problems. So she had chronic fatigue, autoimmune disease for 30 plus years. And we have kind of been working through that and trying every possible option. We finally go to the Mayo Clinic. This is the last stop. We're going to the Mayo Clinic, and we're hoping that they've got some solution to our problem. And we go there, we do all the tests, and they basically say, you got chronic fatigue or some autoimmune. We don't have a solution. And she was just devastated. And so after that, I was very empathetic and I understood, and we were both sad. But after that, I started hearing stories of people who had tried alternative approaches to solving this problem. And so I started listening to them, and I started hearing solutions. And I got excited about those solutions. And I'm thinking, okay, there may be some alternative approaches that we can take. So I'm in sales. So what do? I get out my PowerPoint, and I make my best PowerPoint presentation on why, I'm kidding about the PowerPoint, but why she needs to consider an alternative approach. And what happened? She shut down. It didn't have any impact at all. She wasn't receptive because I needed to do two things first. And that's what I want to share with you. Number one, I need an invitation. Until someone says to you, whether audibly or they're thinking internally, they don't share it, but they land here. Until they say, what do you think I should do? What you say doesn't matter. Until someone extends an invitation, which is really what prospecting is all about. It's really about an invitation. And until someone invites you in, right, and accepts the invitation and invites you in and says, what do you think I should do? Nothing you say matters. And so we've got to get an invitation. That's the first thing we need to do to convert the unreceptives. We've got to get an invitation. The second thing we need to do is not talk, but validate. And this is the mistake that I was making with my wife. And I've certainly made it a lot early in my career. I've got to validate the other person's point of view. This is more powerful than what I say. My ability to communicate and let them know that I understand them has more of impact on my influence than what I say, right? Because it creates receptivity. We'll talk more about that. So we're going to talk about how do we get an invitation, and then how do we validate their point of view. Let's talk about getting an invitation. And again, as we talk about this, just think about how you prospect. Whether you're walking into a room, right, and you need a meeting because maybe you're an existing account, but you're prospecting inside the account. You're trying to move upstream. So maybe you can have a conversation, but you can't get the invitation, or you're actually cold calling. All of this will apply. 3 requirements. Number 1, you need their attention. And this goes back to the information thing. Everybody has ADD, attention deficit disorder. Everybody has ADD. I heard a comedian say the other day, if you don't have ADD, you're not paying attention. So because there's so much, we get 10,000 messages a day, and I've already kind of spoken about this, but we're overwhelmed, and success starts with getting their attention. So I'm going to show you a way to guarantee to get their attention. And by the way, it has nothing to do with your solution. Number 2, why you? I got 15 emails this week, whether they came through LinkedIn, if they were emails, a combination of both, about a solution that I need. I ignored them all because I don't know the difference between any of them. I can't, they're all the same. They're all saying the same thing. Why should I talk to one of them? They all just kind of a generic message. So we're going to talk about how do we get their attention and answer the question successfully, why you? So let's look at a process and a model that'll kind of help bring all this together. And this is where we're getting a little tactical here. So we want to reach the decision maker. And when we want to reach the decision maker, what most people do is they think about the channels. What channels do I want to leverage to reach the decision maker? Phone, right? Phone's working, by the way. A lot of people abandon the phone, but it's kind of like direct mail. Everybody went away from it, but now direct mail probably works because it's so unusual. People are people open up a FedEx package, but phone works. How do we deliver a message via phone? Email, gaining sponsorship, which is probably the most effective. LinkedIn, right? These are all channels to reach the decision maker, and those are important. And there are ways to leverage these channels effectively. And I'd love to share that with you, but I don't have the time. But here's the reason that the success rate is less than 1% when people are cold calling. They don't know how to position the meeting. This is the problem. They don't know how to answer the question, why meet with me? How to get the attention and why you? And once we develop our position, which is just, it's 100 words or less, kind of silver bullet as to what we're trying to say. And once we nail down our position, then we can deliver that through all these mediums. But we got to first know how to position the meeting. And the way we're positioning the meeting is not working. So let me show you what does.
Let me jump in for a second. So you're saying not to lead with value. You want to get their permission first after you validate their point of view.
So what I'm saying is the first thing we need to do is get an invitation, which is what we're right now. That's what we're working on. And you don't lead. I'm going to basically share how do you need to create this message and what you need to lead with. Not permission first. Where position, you should ask for permission after you've delivered or you've developed your reason for meeting. And your position is your reason that you want to meet. Once you deliver your reason, we're going to talk about what you do next.
Got it.
Does that make sense? So yeah. I think it'll help when I unpack all this, and then I'll stop again for questions. The first thing we want to do is articulate their point of view. We will captivate their attention 100% of the time if we lead with what's on their whiteboard. If I were sitting with you right now, we were about to write an email, the first thing I would say is, I want you to picture the person you're reaching out to, okay? Now, they have a whiteboard in their office, most likely. What does it say on their whiteboard? Say that. If you show them a picture of them, if you talk about what they care about, if you focus on what they want or a problem that they have, they will listen to it 100% of the time. Another way I say that is, if I show you a picture of you, you will look at it 100% of the time. Watch when somebody show a picture of somebody and they're in a group, they blow it up and look at themselves. They never ignore that picture, right? So what we do is we lead with us, or we lead with something that's so generic that everybody needs it. And I'm going to give you an example of that in a second. What we want to do is lead with something that's on their whiteboard. And here's why this is so important. And if you understand how our brain works, so we'll get a little nerdy here, a little neuroscience. You can see how to leverage or develop the right message. There's a part of your brain called the reticular activating system, and its job is very simple: to filter through the 10,000 messages you get every day. You cannot process all those messages, so your brain actually ignores messages. But every once in a while, you'll see something and it'll capture your attention. Well, the RAS is doing that work for you. It's bringing your unconscious brain to your subconscious brain. For example, I decided a couple of weeks ago that I'm in the market for a car. All of a sudden, I started noticing cars that fit the description of what I'm looking for. The day before, I drove to work or I drove to the airport, I never noticed a car, didn't see a car. And all of a sudden, I'm seeing cars. Now, I didn't have a talk with myself before I started driving to the airport and say, hey, Tom, now on the way to the airport, pay attention and see if you see any cars you're interested in. No, I just all of a sudden noticed cars. Here's how the RAS works, because it filters messages from your unconscious to your subconscious. It taps you on the shoulder and says, you need to pay attention to this. There's two criteria that activates the RAS. Something you know you need or something you don't understand. Something that's out of the norm. If you know you need it, your brain will say you need that. Like if you see a sign, you got a back problem, you see a sign that says we fix back problems, or it has a picture of pain on a back or something, you'll notice that. You're in the market for a car, you'll notice similar cars. We notice things that we need. Therefore, prospecting and getting an invitation is about alignment. It's not about selling. It's about saying what's on their whiteboard. So if we do that, we understand how the RAS works, we can get their attention. So we've got to say something that's on their whiteboard. Now you may think, well, the question I would be asking right now is, well, how do I know that? But you need to be a student of the people you serve. So if you look at the personas of the people you serve, what's on their whiteboard is probably very similar. The other option is obviously do a little research and talk to people. And whether you do research or you come up with your best guess based on your experience, just determined by probably how qualified the potential account is. So let me give you some examples of what not to do and how to improve it. Here's a message I got the other day. How AI can save business owners time and money. Now it sounds like they've been through a little training. Well, I need to communicate a benefit. This is so generic, and that's what everybody's doing. You need more leads. We're a marketing firm. Or you need automation, you need to save time, you need to reduce, right? So it's just generic, right? That's not what on my whiteboard. I don't have save time and money on my whiteboard. I have specific things that I'm working on to save time and money, maybe, or to make money or time, but we need to be more specific. We need to get more granular and think about who's the person I'm serving and what are the words on their whiteboard. And the more specific, the more powerful. Here's an example of what you should say to me that would gotten my attention. How AI can help a sales training business, which is, by the way, what I own, know what pharma companies are looking to outsource sales training. That would get my attention. We are working with pharma companies. We have a campaign right now that we're marketing our services to pharma companies because of our experience. I would read that message. I would have to read that message. My res would say, you need to pay attention to that. Because you have to know me for me to read that. And I'm going to read messages from people I know, not from some generic marketing engine. So this is an example of what that looks like. Let's look at the next element. So start with their point of view, which could be a problem or a need. The next thing you want to do is communicate a disruptive truth. And this is something that the challenger talked about, the insights, but I'm going to add a little word to it, disruptive. Disruptive activates the RAS. It's unknown. It's unexpected. It's not something I was thinking about. So that's disruptive. Truth is, it could be a principle, a best practice, but it's something that the decision maker or the person you're trying to reach doesn't know about a better way to solve their problem. And it could be 2 words, it could be a small sentence, it could just be like a client I was working with the other day. Their disruptive truth is only 40% of the people need this solution. And it's a solution that everybody's marketing. It's related to something related to taxes. But that was their disruptive. You probably don't need this, and everybody's saying you do. That was their disruptive truth. And they had a statistic related to it. But I gotta somehow communicate something we offer that's unexpected, that can help them, that can help them solve their problem. Lastly is proprietary benefit. What do you own? Disruptive truth elevates you in the mind of the decision maker. Point of view captivates their attention. Proprietary benefit separates you from the competition. What do you do that's unique? And you can just hint at this, but you always offer something unique. It's either could be a who, what, or how. Who, you could be the who they work with, how you work with them, or what you offer. So if you don't have a proprietary solution and other people can say they can offer the same thing, then come up with something unique about how you offer it. If you can't come up with something unique about how you offer it, you are always unique. What will you do to differentiate yourself? So those are the 3 elements of developing your position. It's 100 words or less statement that has these elements in there. And then once you develop it, then you can deliver it through all those mediums. And I'm happy to share lots of examples that we have. That's one of the things that's in the book, is several examples of what we call an other-centered physician. And so I'll stop here. Let me answer a question that may be in somebody's mind, and then I'll stop and see what questions may have bubbled up, Gerhard. A lot of people ask me, are all three required? And the answer is no. The most difficult is disruptive truth. It really depends on the receptivity of the audience. If it's really hard to get a meeting and you're trying to move up the ladder and you're trying to meet with a C-level executive, you better have all three. If you already have a relationship and you're working trying to move upstream inside of an existing account and you have a relationship, you may only need to communicate a problem and hint a little bit at what you do that's unique. But the need for all three is based on the receptivity of the listener. So this gives you best, but good may be effective. Gerhard,
Tom, how do you get to read people's whiteboards?
Yeah, well, here's what I do. Every time I meet with a decision maker, I ask questions that aren't related to our meeting about their whiteboard. If you spend 6 months talking to the people that you serve and moving beyond the solution you offer and say, look, they get a bonus at the end of the year. They also get fired at the end of the year if certain things don't happen. If you know that, you know what they read, what conferences they go to, what are the biggest challenges they make, then you're going to be able to easily start putting together very powerful positioning statements. So one is just to get to know the people you serve. And you can do that with your existing customers. You know, reach out to your existing customers and say, look, I want to be better at providing expertise to my customers. I want to be a trusted partner. I want to have the expertise of leading our customers into you know, solving their problems and embracing better solutions. But I know part of that is for me to learn more about your business. So can we spend 15 minutes and tell me what's on your whiteboard? Again, the other option is talk to people inside the organization. Find a coach who wants you to win, but also is connected to the decision maker. So the more qualified the opportunity, the more it makes sense to do that.
Grant Cardone recently talked about the wisdom of asking the customer, what problem are you trying to solve? Is that a good approach?
Yes, I love that. I love that. But what I want to do, here's what you need to be aware of though. Customers will answer that question based on what you do, right? So if you sell imaging equipment, they're going to answer that question based on imaging question. If you sell vaccines, they're going to answer that question based on vaccine. So you have to back them up. And I always think about it as they have a bridge. They have a current state, which has nothing to do with you, and a desired future state. This is what they really want, which has nothing to do with you. And then they have a plan to get to that desired future state. I want to know that, not how they respond to the product or service or solution that I sell. So great question, but back it up and say, as you think about where you are now, where you want to go, regardless of what I sell, what is it that you're talking about in your meetings and what's your biggest challenge of doing that? So that's how I would maybe improve that question.
So you said earlier, get an invitation before you pitch. How do you get the invitation?
So you get the invitation by developing that position. That's your answer to the question. Again, I can give you more examples of that, but your invitation is by saying, I would like to meet with you because you have this problem. We see that people don't understand this way of solving the problem, and this is what we offer. So your answer to why should I meet with you should include those three elements. And I know you want examples of that. I just don't have time to start sharing, and they won't be relevant for everybody. But we'll definitely be happy to share examples of what that looks like. The other element of getting an invitation, besides you've got to get their attention and communicate why you, by using the model the last thing you need to, the last question or requirement is, what will happen if I let you in? And this is one of the biggest reasons especially if you're inside an existing account, because they may be curious, but what's going to happen if I let you in? Which again, it could be a virtual meeting. It could be meeting in the office. It could be phone call. It's like, what's going to happen? You're going to pester me? You're going to be really sticky? Are you going to sell me? Is it going to be miserable? Is it going to be conflict? What's it going to happen? I don't think it's a good thing. Otherwise, I would let you in. Our conversion rate of getting new meetings would be higher than 1% if they thought it was a good thing. So here's 2 P's that I want you to think about. And kind of going back to, I'll relate this back to my wife in a second. But that's where I need to get the invitation, is I got to get her to talk to me. Same thing with my daughter. My daughter was dating a guy named Philip. I don't know if I can say that live, Gerhard, but this is a long time ago. She's 30 something now, but this is when she was a teenager, and I wasn't too crazy about Philip. So I go knock on her door, and I said, she goes, "What do you want?" I want to talk. I heard you're dating Philip. By the way, you think she was open or closed?
Closed.
She was very closed. Her facial expression communicated that very clearly. And so what do I say? You know, what she's afraid of is you know, she's gonna let me in and I'm gonna give her a speech. So I tell her, there's 2 P's that answer this question: what will happen when you let me in? Pressure and priority. Pressure and priority. A lot of people don't want to meet with you because they're afraid of the pressure. They don't want to feel that conflict, right? So they sense there's going to be pressure. They don't want people to like pressure. They don't like it. So that's why they avoid sellers. That's why they're avoiding solution. So think of it as there's a tug of war because of what you do, and because your role, and because there's a potential commission involved. There's a tug of war, and because I'm Tyndall's father, she thinks there's going to be a tug of war, right? And nobody wants a tug of war. It's not fun. It's stressful. It's this conflict. It's emotional. I don't want it. We avoid. That's why when we walk into a store and somebody says, "Can I help you?" You may need help, but you say no, which has been true in every country I've ever been in. And I ask that question, they say, "No, I'm just looking." Right? So we have to eliminate the pressure and the tug of war by dropping the rope. And by dropping the rope, it's an easy way to remember. Communicate to the customer, or if you're in a personal conversation. And by the way, I bring up these personal conversations because if you can succeed in these conversations, you can succeed anywhere. It's the most difficult conversations you'll have are with your family, or maybe your friends. I think it's easy. Your customers are easy. But what do I mean by drop the rope? Drop the rope is basically saying, I'm going to put all options on the table. And this is how I drop the rope with my daughter. You can date whoever you want. I'm not going to stop you from dating Philip. If I'm talking to the customer, you have 4 options. You can embrace my solution. You can embrace part of my solution. You can stay with your current provider, or you could do nothing. All those options are acceptable. I'll put all those options on the table. My goal is to stand beside you and look at all those options and figure out what's best for you, which goes to priority. My priority is to help you solve your problems. So that's why I'm going to let you in, because you're trustworthy, because you're not going to pressure me. The other reason I'm going to let you in is because what's your agenda going to be? If I'm the priority, what's your agenda? Well, your agenda needs to be, I need to understand your point of view, not tell you my point of view. So those are the 3 requirements for the invitation to be accepted. You've got to get their attention by starting with what's on their whiteboard. You got to communicate why you versus the competition. And they got a lot of options. Just assume that when you send out a message, they got 10 messages that said the same thing. You got to differentiate yourself. And then lastly, what are you going to do when you're in? And by the way, you don't have to have a live conversation to communicate that. You can communicate that in email. I'm not sure if your smart solution isn't fit. I have no idea if you need I don't know you. My goal is to simply understand what's important, what's on your whiteboard, and then we'll determine together to see if it makes sense to me. And that's how you get an invitation. And by the way, you cannot fake this. Motive is transparent. If you start to use these as techniques, they are going to smell it just like you sense it with the people that you work with. You can tell when people don't mean the compliments they deliver. You can tell when people have an ulterior motive. You can tell when people aren't listening to you. You can tell when people don't care about you. Motive is ultimately transparent. And this is why customers are rejecting a sales call, because sellers aren't approaching it this way. But if you do, they'll meet with you. So what do we do when we get in? And we talked a little bit about that. We don't need to talk. If I get my wife, this is what I did. I've delivered the invitation. I finally changed my approach with my wife, and I said, do you mind if we talk about this? I just want you to be healthy. I know you're struggling. I know it's been challenging. I don't have the answer. I don't know what you should do. Do you want to talk about this? She said yes. She finally said, you know what? I said, are you open to even looking at other alternative approaches? And she said, I don't know. And so then she said, but she was willing to talk about it. So what do I do now? Start sharing my case studies? No, I need to take the trip. And this is the most powerful thing that we can do as humans if we're going to communicate and influence, is not a powerful value prop or deliver an incredibly powerful speech, but to validate somebody's point of view by taking the trip. Because until we can articulate their point of view as well or better than they can, they are never going to listen to our point of view. And there's two stages to taking the trip. The first stage, I think, maybe even be the most critical stage. It's the O moment. It's when you take the trip and they start talking to you, because you remember, you got a polarized point of view. They see the world completely different. You're Republican and they're Democrat, right? Or whatever the polarized point of view. I mean, it's completely different points of view. You take the trip and they start telling you what they think, and you go, oh. And it's a shift where you actually, for the first time, understand why they believe what they believe. Everybody's position makes sense to them. There's a reason that they believe what they believe. And when you take the trip, you come down and you see their point of view and you have an oh moment. You go, oh. And it's actual a physical change. You know what my wife said to this when I took the trip? I said, so what is it? I can tell that you're not open to these alternative, and I can tell that you shut down. Tell me what's going on there. And she said, every time I talk to somebody about my illness, they want to fix me. No one cares about me. And I went, oh, that's why. It's not that you're against the alternative. It's just nobody cares. Everybody wants to fix you. I'm like, oh. So what happens when we have this oh moment? Empathy starts to, you don't want to pay for a more expensive solution because you're about to lose your job. Oh, or you guys have cash problems, or you're related to the person who sold you the solution or is providing an alternative. Whatever it is, you're like, there's a reason. Now, you don't have to agree with this reason. But when you do that and you have the oh moment, that's when the empathy starts happening in the meeting. There's a magical connection that occurs. Now you need to feed it back to them. And then you'll hear the word that changes everything. Exactly. And when you feed it back to them and they say exactly, there's three things that happen. One, you know what they really want. You know the truth. You cannot change what they want until you know what they want, right? The heart wants what the heart wants. The mind decides to pursue it. The mind comes up with it justified. What the heart wants, the mind justifies. If we don't really know what the heart wants, if we don't know what they really, really want, what's really important to them, we'll never be able to change it. So we have the truth, because we can't change the truth if we don't know the truth. Secondly, they're receptive. If we validate their point of view, now they're going to be open to taking the trip and seeing our point of view. But if we're not receptive to them, they're not going to be receptive to us. And the last one is there's going to be a deeper level of connection, right? We're not just selling a solution, we're selling dopamine hit. It's the most powerful thing in the brain, the dopamine hit. That's what we all do. Almost everything we do is for dopamine hit. And when people understand us and listen to us, there's a dopamine hit, and they want to be with you. They want to spend time with you because you care about them. And that's why we do all the things we do, is for the dopamine hit. So take the trip. Those are the two most powerful things I can share. You got to get an invitation and validate their point of view by taking the trip. Any questions at this point, Gerhard?
Well, it reminds me, you did the first presentation about that framework in Florida.
Yeah.
And I still remember the audience. Everybody was taking notes. And as you were talking, I was taking notes again, because that framework is so rich. And the question really is, how do you turn a framework into behaviors? And so how do you translate that it will be manifested by every salesperson in the company?
Love that. That's perfect, because that's what I want to talk about next, because this is the concept. And by the way, if you're thinking about how do you lead and develop your sales organization, and you want to get them to change the way they sell, they got to first embrace the need to change. This is why these models are so important, because until they believe it, it doesn't matter what you do. And I think a lot of times in training or coaching, we don't get them to embrace it. We just tell them what to do, or we say, watch us. And so that's the purpose of spending time on a model like this. Before I answer your question, I want to challenge the listeners with an experiment. I would say spend a day or a week, depending on how much you're going to interact with people, and just note the number of people that actually validate your point of view. I think you'll probably come back with 0. And by the way, when I say validate, I don't mean hear. People hear what you say. I'm talking about validate. Like I'm really good at hearing what my wife says. I'm not very good at validating what my wife says. And so there's a big difference between hearing and validating. So do an experiment and note the number of times that people actually listen to what you say, feed it back to you, and make sure you understand that they know what you meant and that they're chewing on what you said and they're curious. And notice how that feels. And notice how the opposite feels when they don't. And because most people do is their eyes glaze over and they move on. And why is this important? Because it's the most important thing we do if we want to change somebody's belief. So let's talk about how to turn this into action. We need to do 2 things. If I'm leading a sales organization or coaching, I got to do 2 things. If we want people to take the trip, we got to give them a roadmap. I have been in sales training for 28 years. I rarely have seen a roadmap. I see questions all the time, but they need a roadmap that frames up when you're leading discovery. These are the things that you need to focus on. These are your objectives for what you need to focus on to ensure that we understand what's on the decision maker's whiteboard, what's their plan, what are their gaps, what are their priorities, who are the decisions, all the things that we need to uncover. And that's not the goal of this right now, although we can provide information for that. And I'll share more about that in a minute. But we need a discovery roadmap. The other thing we need is discovery skills. When you first begin discovery and you first start taking the trip, you're going to get limited information. You're going to get facts. But as you do it, if you're better at it, the better you ask questions and the better how effectively you respond to what they say, the receptivity is going to grow, and they're going to start giving you unfiltered, unguarded information. And that's when you get to the truth. And this is when they lean in and they start to tell you things you can tell they haven't told other people. Well, actually, we don't really know what we're doing. Well, actually, there's not a budget defined, but I don't think it matters. Well, actually, I'm not the decision maker. They are. And this is what they really care about. And actually, we're currently working with your competitor, and they didn't do a very good job. And that's why we're talking to you. And we don't really know what we're doing. That's when you start. And that's all based on how you ask questions and how you respond to what they say, how you position the questions, what type of questions you use, and how they respond. So that's obviously not enough information for you to go build a training program. But that's one of the purposes that I wrote the book, is all the information to create the skills and content that you need is in the book. Any questions about that before we dive into the last one, Gerhard?
No, I wanted to make a comment, which is when I think about, the underlying psychology of what you're proposing. There was this parent, adult, child um, training by Dr. Byrne, I believe, where if you talk to somebody else from the parental position, you tell them what to do. When you talk with them from a child's perspective, again, you don't go very far, but the adult perspective is you validate uh, people's point of view. And I think that what would be a good idea to recognize when you speak to a client, are you speaking to a child and tell them what to do? Or and and the adult position is so much more effective.
It is, it's totally, and also you think about it even as a leader talking to a team member. We
Yeah.
can sometimes revert into that parent-child relationship because we don't look for the invitation to be extended. We just walk in the room and say, I'm your leader, here's what you need to do. And all of a sudden their receptivity plummets because you're back into this parent-child. And this is the key, is in the word I just keep coming back to, is influence. We have no control over anybody, right? We may be able to make them show up for meetings or pass certain tests, but when it comes to controlling someone's beliefs and behaviors of what they do out in the field, we have no control. So the only option we have is influence, and our authority and position gives us no influence, which is one of the challenges of parents. We move from authority because they're four, right? And then they move into preteen and teens, and now it's all about influence, and we still try to tell them what to do. And it doesn't work because, just like with my daughter, she walks out the door, I have no control over her, right? And trying to gain control robs us of the ability of influence, right? We might feel better, but it robs us. And so a lot of our instincts of how we communicate really actually sabotage our ability to convert the disinterested, to convert the unreceptive, which is cool thing about the concepts that we're talking about. This isn't complex. It's just very counterintuitive. If anybody's listening to this and they buy into this right now, and you watch what you do tomorrow, you'll go right back to doing what you did before. Somebody will say something that you don't agree with, and if you're good at arguing and you're good at debating, you'll start talking about why they're wrong. And then they'll start talking about why we are wrong, and then you're going to start talking about why they're wrong. And as soon as the argument begins, influence ends. Matter of fact, there was a really interesting study, Gerhard, that I uncovered while I was writing the book. But they actually wired people's brains so they could see what was happening emotionally inside their brains and what part of their brains lit up. And so they showed them their favorite politician, right? And this is your favorite, this is our favorite politician. I love Biden. I love Trump. I love whoever, Bush, whatever, Clinton, whatever. And then they show the politician contradicting themselves. Actual video footage of the politician contradicting themselves. The logical part of the brain shut off. It shut off. The emotional part of the brain lit up. So, because what happens when people are unreceptive, which they immediately are when they think that we're trying to sell them something, right? The brain literally shuts off. It's like the logic shuts off, the emotions start, and when the emotions are driving the show, logic's out the window. So we have to learn a new approach, which again is very counterintuitive. And that used to not be true because so many people needed what we did. The market wasn't so saturated. It was easier to sell. That's not true anymore. Let's talk about this last thing, process, because I think this is the simplest thing to fix. This is the simplest thing to fix. People have, almost every organization I talk to, have a sales process. I think having a sales process, as I was talking to a client the other day, we got a 9-point sales process in our Salesforce CRM. Of course you do, right? Because that's intuitive to the seller. What do I need to do? What are the stages? What's the probability of winning a deal as we go through those stages? But the problem is it's a sales process, which only helps your sellers. It does not help your customers. And here's why this matters, is when you develop a sales process and you're working off a sales process, this is the number one reason opportunities stall, is because the reps don't know how to move an opportunity forward, because the customer doesn't want to go from prospect to qualify to present to negotiate. There's nothing there for them. That's what we need them to do, but it doesn't help them. And it hurts our ability to lead them through the best process that will help them make a decision, because it's our sales process. What we need is a buyer process. We need to change our process to at least include this layer. This is the journey that the buyer goes through. And our job as a salesperson, if I want to be a trusted partner, is to help them know how to go through this journey and offer value as they navigate this journey. This also drives what I talk about in discovery. I need to know this. So let's look at each section. The first thing they need to know is their destination. I want to know where they're going somewhere. What do they want? How are they going to measure success? They have a destination. Whenever they're talking to you, whatever stage, it started somewhere. They have a destination. And by the way, this probably happened above the person you're talking to, especially if you came in late in the process. Where are they going and why? Then they have a strategy. And this is their bet. And most likely it's going to be hard to change your strategy, but this is the bet. This is the bet that they're making that says we can reach this destination if we make this bet. And it could be with, we believe in people development, we believe in technology, whatever we're going to merge organizations, whatever their bet is, they've got a strategy. Then they're going to develop their initiatives. What do we need to do to implement this strategy to reach our destination? And then we're going to start looking at options. Right, and this is when they typically start talking to you. If you're in a reactive mode, and then we're going to implement and we're going to measure. So our goal is to provide value at each stage. So let's look at what value, and this is the responsibility of the sales leader. We need to come up with the resources and events that we can offer at every one of these stages. So destination, who can help them? If I know what their destination is, what resources do we have, or who inside our organization can help them reach their destination? What are best practices related to their strategy? Who else has done this? What strategies were similar? How did they implement it? What worked? What didn't work? Initiatives. What are they missing? This is the true statement. I probably implemented in my role right now in my business probably 150 plus training initiatives. I can't name one where they weren't missing something, because this is all I do. All I do, and it's probably more than 150, is implement training initiatives. So when a client reaches out to me and says, hey, we're interested in training our sales organization, they may have done it 0 times, 1 time, maybe twice. Maybe twice. I've done it hundreds of times. So it's my role to help them see what they're missing related to their initiatives. Now there are options. We need to help them figure out what's the best way to select a partner. When they come up with their workday documents and they come up with their RFPs and all the things they do, they usually don't know what they're doing. I need to educate them on how to select a partner. Whether you select me or select another partner, there are best practices to selecting a partner, and I need to be able to communicate that to them. And then lastly, how can we help them improve once they've implemented? This is our role. This is my role as a trusted partner, is to provide value at every one of these stages. And the benefits obviously are great. The velocity's there. If I know how to help them navigate this, I'm going to see velocity, right? I'm also very bold about having conversations. When I come in at the options phase and they're talking to partners, I can communicate why we need to back up, right? Because if we don't back up, they're going to miss something. And I have the information available to me to do that. The other thing it does is it motivates your sales organization to do demand generation, right, versus demand fulfillment, right? Because if I get in early and I know how to affect the stages, I can have an influence on the decision-making process, and I'm gonna win more deals. And again, the deal velocity is gonna go up. Versus if I'm this demand fulfillment and waiting for it to happen, which is, by the way, a reality. We all are going to be responding to leads and people who reach out to us at this latter stage. But I need to do the best I can to back it up if possible and tell them why. But if I get in early, I need to move from, well, let me know when you're ready, or I'll check in with you in a month, to I can be involved in every single stage of the process because my leadership has given me the tactical tools to do so.
We got 5 minutes left.
I'm done. So let me close with this, and we'll open it up to Q&A. I've thrown a lot of information out to you, almost everything you want to know, and I'm not trying to sell the book. By the way, if you don't want to buy the book, can you go to the book website, which is on this screen, unreceptivebook.com, and you just type in any number you want. There's a section where it says you want all the resources that comes with the book. Just type in any number. It'll ask for your order number. Type in any number, and it'll give you all the resources. If you found value in this, buy the book. It'll help you. Reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have any specific questions. I'd love to connect with you there. Or we have a white paper article ebook that I wrote that addresses a lot of these concepts in a more granular detail. So lots of options for you to get more information without hiring Aslan. So the goal was to provide real tactical solutions. So I hope this has been helpful. Thanks for joining me.
Can you share an example of a 100-word position statement?
Can I give an example? Let's see. Can I give one? Okay, so the company that I worked with that provides tax consulting to CPAs. And so everybody's reaching out to CPAs about ERC tax credits. And so their position was, you're losing clients because you can't meet all their tax needs. Basically, that was their biggest whiteboard problem, was they're losing clients because the clients have to talk to other accountants about other challenges that they have that are related to COVID. So client turnover is their biggest whiteboard issue. I'm so busy running my firm, I can't do it. So that was the problem they highlighted. You've got client turnover, and how do you stop client turnover? Because you can't address all their tax questions related to the new tax codes. The ERC is the big issue. It just says, and here's the reality: most people don't qualify for ERC tax credits. All we do is focus on how to help your clients get blah 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 tax credit, something along those lines. So that was their 100-word position that they could deliver over and over again, whether it was a phone call, email, etc. Again,
so what was the disruptive truth in that position statement?
Everybody's reaching out saying you are qualified for ERC tax credits.
Oh, I see.
Their reach out said only 40% actually qualified. They were doing the exact opposite of what everybody was saying, which got their attention, built credibility, built trust. So they come up with a real specific number.
And when you describe the Aslan training to prospects, what is your proprietary benefit?
It's related to receptivity. So that was one that came to mind. So if I were going to create a position, which I have, it's people can't get meetings. So they want to get meetings. Your turnover is high, and your ratio of getting more meetings is low. And what most people think they need to do is improve their messaging. That actually backfires. Your real problem is customers are resisting a solution, or resisting a sales rep, not a solution, something along those lines. We focus specifically on creating receptivity, or what our unique might be related to, and this is a really good point. What might be unique is the vertical we're going over. This is why sales reps have got to take the AI information or whatever information they're getting and curate it, not copy, but curate it to say just come up with a specific proprietary. Like for us, it might be proprietary, might be our focus on a vertical or focus on a specific role. We might say there's 11 roles in sales, and you have 3 of these roles, or it could be you're in this vertical. So those could be what's proprietary.
So when you talk about when you talk about improving the message, then you're trying to build, engineer a better seed, but the better way, the better approach would be to prepare the soil first.
Prepare the soil. And the seed is when I refer to the seed, it's your value prop, but you deliver that later. It's more your focus on their problem, different way to think about it, and your unique way of tackling the problem. The seed is a solution. You don't talk about the solution until you have an invitation.
And we are running out of time, but a number of people have asked, can they get the PowerPoint? Are we allowed to share that?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. And I also had an idea. When you did the presentation in Florida at Sales 3.0, there was a 30-minute amazing presentation, and we created an executive summary where there's a link to the video. Can we share that with our audience for all those attended today?
I would love that because there's some content in there that we didn't include in this presentation. A little bit more deeper. I love that.
So we'll send it out later today or tomorrow.
Wonderful.
Well, thank you so much, Tom. That was very enlightening. I recommend that anybody who wants to learn more go to aslantraining.com and go to Amazon and get Unreceptive.
Yeah, I hope at least check it out. Hopefully
Awesome.
it was helpful. Thanks for having me, Gerhard, and all those who are on the webinar. Thanks for joining and hearing what we have to say. Very grateful.
Thank you.